Hey, how are you? Can you hear me?
I do.
Awesome.
Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay. I brain farted. I think the message begin debate or whatever was just taking a second to appear on my screen. Okay, you go by Joe?
Joel, yeah, and Chaz, right?
Yep.
Awesome.
What time is it where you're at? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, it's 11:30 a.m. I'm right outside of Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. Well, it is 1:30 a.m. on Sunday where I'm at. I'm in
Oh,
South
geez.
Korea. Yeah, it always messes with my head a bit. Um, as you can see, my debate subject is sort of broad,
Hmm.
and that's probably because it's 1:30 a.m. And I'm on Call Out and on lots of different Facebook forums and on Quora, if you're ever on Quora,
Yeah.
which is actually a pretty good webpage. And I see a lot of what, in my opinion, would be misconceptions about what atheism necessarily entails or entails, um, not just by theists but by atheists as well.
Hmm.
Um, so I thought that it would be something interesting to discuss, and debate for me is absolutely the perfect format to discuss anything. It puts us in a sort of adversarial position. But I think I might have explained this in previous call out debates. I don't actually debate because I'm interested in winning. I debate for the purposes of my own education. Um, so if when we're finished I have lost, that's okay because I'll have learned something new. Um, I've been an atheist for about 30 years, approximately 30 years this year, maybe a little bit longer. I am 56 in the U.S. I'm 58 in Korea. And I'll just explain briefly um, what atheism is for me, and I can give an example maybe of a few of the viewpoints that I consider heavily extrapolated. Uh, I don't believe in God. He, she, it might exist. When I say I don't believe in God, I'm not referring specifically to the God of the Bible or the Quran or anything like that. Um, However, I am not critical of belief in God because, after all, he, it, she, they, whatever might exist. I have no vested interest either way. Um, I was a Christian for a long time, um, but that's what God is for me. I'm not somebody who I see it. I see it posed as denying the existence of God. Well, to deny, there would be the a priori assumption that God existed, and I was, refusing to acknowledge it. So I don't look at it as denying. I used to believe in God. Uh, at some point, I stopped about 30 years ago. Um, but again, he might. And a lot of people will make assumptions that if I'm an atheist, I have some people who will tell me sincerely that it has to mean that I'm a Satanist, or that I'm an uber liberal, which I sort of am, or that I really know that there's a God deep in my soul, and they might be right, maybe I do. Um, or they say that if I'm an atheist, then I have to be an evolutionist. And I understand why they say, but that's not actually true for me. So, over to you.
Well, first off, thanks for taking the debate, and I'm on the same page as you. I see this as a chance to grow, a chance to learn. Some debates I call out, I really am trying to win, especially if there's cash prizes on the line. You know that changes up the incentive game a little bit. But I really appreciate your story, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about atheism. Now, as I see it, there is little a atheism and there's big A atheism.
Sure.
So kind of the little a atheism is just the claim or just the belief that there is no God. Right. And for a long time, I would say, gosh, and just in terms of European history, all through the Middle Ages, even into the Enlightenment, being called an atheist would be the same thing as somebody accusing you of being mentally ill, right? Atheism was very highly looked down upon. John Locke wrote his treatise on tolerance where he made the case where we should be tolerant of other religious beliefs. Supernatural claims are not provable. In the last sentence in his treatise on tolerance, he actually talks about how this applies to everybody but atheists. How we need not suffer atheists because they have no moral grounding, and I've had the same experience with you, and I've had people tell me the exact same things before, implying that I lack a moral barometer, that I'm not really an atheist, that nobody can be an atheist, and I think all that's absurd, and I actually think atheism is the best worldview. It's the best way to discover what is apparent, to get as close to objective reality as we can. Because to me, atheism eliminates all presuppositions, right? Have you ever argued with a presuppositionalist?
I have, and it's one of the most frustrating things in the world, because most of them, unfortunately, aren't honest initially about the position that they've adopted. Mm-hmm. And to be truthful, if you're a presuppositionalist, there's no point in having a discussion, because they've already made the decision, and put it this way: I have one friend who's a presuppositionalist who doesn't fall into that boat, but all of the other, hundreds online of presuppositionalists I've met, they're not arguing with me, because for me, argument means that there's the possibility that I'm wrong. At least for me, that's a given. I can be wrong, and sort of part and parcel of presuppositionalism. That's a major failing, that you can be wrong. And they then take the tactic. Well, if you can be wrong, then how do you know? Well, I don't know. That's sort of the point.
Right. Exactly.
So you're an atheist yourself, then?
I am, yeah, and that's why I took this debate, because I think atheism is the best worldview, and I believe that atheism, when tempered with other sort of concepts, should be advocated for. I believe in atheist activism.
I think that I do, but it depends on what you mean by that. Mm-hmm. I think that it should be. Oh, I don't know. I think that it should be advocated for, but in a humble way.
Right.
I don't think, I have a younger sister who's a devout Christian. I still love her to death. Very seldom, however, does she ever tell me that I'm going to burn in hell forever, or etc. I come from a fundamentalist, evangelical, Pentecostal background. That's what I was raised in, and she's the sane one in the family, and so she doesn't alienate me before any conversation has started. And you talk to theists, and I get where they're coming from, because I was a Christian for a long time, and I unfortunately probably quoted, the fool in his heart says that there is no God. I was probably that idiot at one point. And I have lots of Christians who will tell me that I couldn't have been a Christian in the first place, because if I was a Christian, I would know, and, apparently could never change my mind subsequently. And I understand that too, because that's a belief that I at one point held. So when you say that you should advocate for atheism, I don't want to be the jackass that...
Mm-hmm.
And there's too many atheists who were assholes.
Right. The fedora-wearing atheist is what I like to call it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yes, I think that it's a position that is logical, rational, etc. But I guess I'm not an activist for it, because sometimes I see it as counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
All of the best Christians, all the Christians that I think have the greatest potential to convert others to Christianity, are the ones who have humility and actually express a little bit of uncertainty. And that's not why I tell people that I could be wrong. I tell people I could be wrong because I could be wrong.
Right.
Interesting.
So I guess I'll elaborate a little bit. So in terms of public policy, in terms of the government, I'm actually a secularist before I'm an atheist. And I think there's an important distinction to be made between secularism and atheism. A secular government is not an atheist government, and an atheist government is not a secular government. A secular government makes no supernatural claim either way. An atheist government, which we might see in like the Soviet Union, for example, makes a supernatural claim. I honestly, I believe I would be just as offended if the United States came out and made it their official stance that there was no God. That would bother me, because I don't believe that is a function of government. So
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So in terms of public policy, that's kind of where I'm at. Secularism first, and atheism has no place there, because I would be. I'm trying to stay philosophically consistent, if you get what I'm saying. And I think secularism does that the best. Now, what I mean when I talk about atheist activism, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I do. So in my town of Clarksville, I'm actually the president of a group called Clarksville Atheists, and we're kind of a Facebook group. We got about 375 people, and we do Easter egg hunts. We do house parties for adults. We do play dates for our kids. People have kids. They all come over. They all play together. We do study sessions, not just about atheism, but about I would actually like to see it expanded more. I'd like to see like people teaching like woodcrafting, just kind of exchanges of skills and ideas. And we engage with the public, and we do Ask an Atheist Day. So we have a little river walk where we go set up a tent, and we have hot dogs, and we have water and soda, and then we pass out to people to try to have conversations with them. Because I think you're spot on. There's a difference between persuasion and lecturing. People don't like getting lectured. People are open to conversation. They're open to banter. They're open to persuasion. And I think that to advance the ideology of atheism, that's the best way to go about it. Not to belittle people's beliefs, but to examine them together. Have you seen street epistemology videos?
I haven't even heard of the street epistemology videos. Send me a link in the comments or something.
I will. They're phenomenal. And it's just a really friendly guy who just kind of applies the Socratic method to people about all sorts of beliefs, and they tend to be sort of God question type beliefs, but they can just kind of take a 10-minute conversation together, and you get down to why people believe what they believe. Now, there's, I guess, the assumption that atheists assume that they're smarter than the theists, or I guess there's that stereotype around them, which I actually reject. I think atheism tends to correlate with level of intelligence and with level of education. I mean, that's demonstrable to be true, but by no means do I think I'm smarter than anyone else just by the mere fact that I'm an atheist. I believe that I have a belief that's more grounded in empiricism or what is apparent. And that's what really, when I talk about atheists advocating advocating for atheism, that's what I'm really advocating for. That we need to ground our worldview and ground our actions in what is empirically demonstratable or logically deductible.
100%. We're on the same page there. And you mentioned Socratic method, which I tend to think of as how do I pronounce this? Dialectical method.
Yeah.
But there's a problem with that is people like to connect that with Marxism. And of course, Marxism is evil and scary.
Yeah.
So I suppose the Socratic method is a safer term. So I'm pleased because it appears that we both we both engage in discourse for the purpose of reaching maybe a consensual truth, or
right.
in reaching some new truth.
Give me 1 second. I'm sorry, my
Sure.
baby's crying. My kids
No
are still
problem.
awake. So
That's okay. I'm gonna pick up my dog. I picked up my baby in your absence there.
Yeah, I don't know which one's cuter.
Oh, I think yours is probably the winner.
What kind? Is it a little Scott Terrier?
It's a sort of shaggy miniature poodle.
Oh, right on.
Like toy size.
Yeah.
And this is when she would normally be sleeping, so she's grumpy.
So I do have some questions for you, just in kind of learning from each other and what have you. How do you tackle the morality question?
I have a very I'm not trying to flatter myself, but I have what I think is a unique perspective on the morality issue. I think that all morality is objective, but not in the way that is typically understood. In metaphysics and philosophy generally, when we talk about something being objective, we're actually talking about a rule that we've derived from observations that we've made. So think of them as, think of the laws of nature. And those are, we consider to be objectively true. The laws of nature are objectively true, but they're things that we actually inferred from our observations of nature. So pretty much for most of the world and most of human history, there are things that I'm going to get myself in trouble here by using the words right and wrong or good and evil, but there are certain behaviors that that 99% of our fellow humans don't want to experience or don't want to have inflicted upon their loved ones. So this is an observation that we've made. So in that sense, I think that morals are objective. I don't need at all a universal, or a galactic or universal policeman or nanny to tell me what's wrong or right behavior. And I'm a bit puzzled, frankly, by those who do. It puts God in the position of my dad, except for I've never moved out of the house. So, you know, imagine voluntarily putting myself in yourself in the position where your dad says it's bad to eat peanut butter toast before. Oh, go for it. You can put your. You can.
Oh
You
no,
know,
I was just
if you need to eat peanut butter toast before 10 a.m. because I said that it is. That's just the end of it. Well, that's sort of what do you want to say? The theistic explanation of morality equates to.
right.
So you have an omnipotent, omniscient super being who usually is purported to live outside of time and space, and he gets to decide for us, or she, it, they decide for us what is wrong and what isn't. And I think that's sort of a chicken shit. I don't want to say idolatry, but it's almost fan worship,
Yeah.
or I don't think it's necessary. It's pretty obvious to look out at the world and deduce that most humans don't want to be mugged, raped, shot at, murdered, etc., etc. And I don't need an omniscient, omnipotent super being to put that on a list of commandments someplace. It's sort of obvious, and even if I do require that super being, well, humanity has done a pretty crappy job, because there have been a few murders and rapes in the world. So I that's really it.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe a natural rights. It's kind of what I'm discerning from that. Would you consider yourself like a secular natural rights advocate?
I try not to use those words because they have lots of different meanings throughout.
Right.
But yes, I think that I want to divorce human behaviors from the adjectives right and wrong. There are behaviors that I certainly don't think are right because I'm a product of this world, right? It would be pretty hard for me to argue that it was acceptable to murder somebody for a cheeseburger or whatever. Think of anything heinous that any human has done. I think that you're unwell if you're either unwell or maybe driven to some things by desperation. Maybe you become a mugger because that was literally the only way that, in an immediate sense, that you could care for your family.
Yeah.
But as far as people who would stalk a woman in the park, or anything else that you read up, and part of my French, anything else that you read about that's pretty fucked up on the internet or the newspaper, I think that you're unwell if you are a perpetrator of those behaviors. And I don't think that it needs any discussion beyond that, or excuse me, I don't think there needs to be any greater explanation.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean to pigeonhole your belief.
No.
I'll tell you my background.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a junior at university right now, and my major, or my concentration rather, is moral, political, and ethical philosophy.
Oh.
So I know I slap natural rights on there, and I know that there's, I mean, even within natural right theory, there's a wide variety of views to where they derive from and what exactly that means. I guess that was kind of the archetype that I associated most closely with what you're describing. But I'll tell you, I guess, my response to the moral question. Sure. I think morality is tied to utility. I'm actually a utilitarian, and I think we can see that source of morality in empathy. I think empathy is an evolved adaptive trait for a communal species. So you think back to a state of nature. We have kind of Homo erectus / like Homo sapien, like right on the edge, like the plains of Africa.
Sure.
We're not very big, we're not very fast, but we are smart. And when we work together, we maximize that intelligence. So I like to point, like, if I could hammer down a starting point, think like a group of unrelated people came together to slay a wildebeest, and divvying up that meat. Well, that right there is the precursor to morality, right? So that's like the precursor to like distribution of wealth. That's a precursor to justice, to desert, and from that place that I believe that we came from, we can kind of extrapolate through the ages to the morality that is today. But I agree with you. 99.9% of moral questions are solved by common sense. And actually, I can't remember the school of thought, but there is a school of philosophy, of moral philosophy, that agrees with you. I always call them like common sensitarian, but they have like a different proper name.
Right.
Yeah. And I think if there was an objective morality, that's where it would exist. And I don't know, the question that like moral and ethical philosophers really split hairs over is literally like that 1% of situations where there's kind of extraordinary circumstances. But I try to ground it in utility, in what's the best overall good for, I would actually say, all sentient species. I try not to be like a speciesist.
Sure.
I actually believe that, yeah, that all organisms with agency and the capacity to feel pain are of equal moral worth. But again, I don't know. I might be going a bit too lib for some atheists, but that's just where I'm at.
I agree with you. I was a vegetarian for fairly militant one, actually a vegan for 2 years, and lack of self-discipline and liking bacon eventually reversed that. But I have no problem in applying humanity to species that aren't human. I don't know that there are any species on Earth that have the same level of humanity that humans did, and let's throw sentience and sapience in there too. But I don't know that elephants don't, as an example, nor do I know that whales don't. And there's certainly times when I look at my puppy and I've yelled at her, and I see regret, sorrow, and yes, maybe I'm reading into it, but But either way, I if we I think if there are other sentient, sapient life forms elsewhere in the universe, regardless of how many tentacles they have, that I wouldn't be speciesist about them.
Hmm.
Wow.
Well, you actually talked about elephants, and they're actually one of my favorite things to bring up in the morality question, because they're a species where we can see what I guess one might normatively call morality. So, an elephants, they exist in these pods of unrelated. It's not just families, but there's many families that come together that live in these pods, and they will actually risk their lives for one another, to save one another. And I think that, again, that's an adaptive trait in a communal species, such as elephants are. And I also think it's interesting to point out that we tend not to see what normatively might be called immorality in really in any animals. So we don't see animals really going out and killing for pleasure, for example. Right. If they kill, it's for a utilitarian purpose. It's to feed.
And even with elephants, there have been a couple of cases where elephants have been abused in India and Thailand, primarily. And they trampled entire huts down and all of the occupants just because they got tired of it. And they did it in the dead of night. So, it was premeditated. It was murder, but justified, at least in their minds, because they have minds.
Yeah, of course.
If there was somebody who lived next door to you or to I, who killed our kids and knocked the snot out of me whenever they felt like it, you might eventually resort to that sort of a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have no policemen to turn to.
Right.
So, yeah, no, elephants are amazing.
Phenomenal creatures.
I feel guilty when I enjoy seeing them in the zoo, but I mean, I do enjoy seeing them, but I feel sad at the same time.
Right. And there might even be an argument from utility there that, I guess, to sacrifice, I don't know. I have moral conflicts about zoos and that sort of thing, but I feel like if the end result is a greater appreciation of the species, well, it might suck for that one in the zoo, and hopefully they have a great habitat for them. But if it can allow, if it causes a greater respect for in humanity to allow for the species to continue, well, I guess I'm all right with that. But yeah, I think when a theist talks about how there can be no morality, I think what they're confusing is an absolute knowable morality. I think there could be some. I think as I said, morality is absolutely an adaptive trait in humanity, and I mean, if that bothers people, that's where it comes from. Well, I mean, that's why I advocate for empiricism and for atheism. But you want to talk about first cause?
Yeah. So can we sort of wrap first cause into, because they frequently are, into abiogenesis? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
And the Big Bang and et cetera, et cetera. I know that those shouldn't necessarily be conflated, but I've been in very few conversations with
they always are,
in which it wasn't.
Yeah.
I'm going to be totally straight up and say that while I don't know that intelligent design is a scientific hypothesis, that it's not a bad hypothesis. However, it ultimately, I don't see it as having any explanatory power. I mean, it's one explanation, right? And it's a fairly reasonable one, because the cell is pretty complicated. Things that exist on this earth are pretty complicated. and there are things that we would have difficulty designing from scratch. Let's just put it that way. Although, maybe one day we will, but that will be with the benefit of many, 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 many years of looking at things that are existent now and copying them.
Right.
So I don't think it's a hideous suggestion, but I don't think that it ultimately explains anything, because if you take, the Kalem cosmological argument, they argue that there had to be something that didn't have a beginning, that was the first cause, and that is God.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's sort of arbitrary,
Right.
and try to prove to me, and I've read William Lane Craig's arguments, and none of them convince that things can't have existed forever. Well, prove that to me. Really prove it to me. I think, and this is a little bit controversial, even for most of my, fellow atheists. I don't respect historical sciences at all. So I think it's almost cute that we have scientists saying the universe is 13.5 billion years old. Well, maybe, but science in its modern form is new, right? So to me, it's sort of arrogant and possibly even naive to be making pronouncements about the age of the universe and fine-tuning and all of that other crap, when we've essentially only just pulled our heads out of the sand and our own asses, again, pardon me. In 100 years, if I'm alive 100 years from now, not that I'm anticipating it, and the explanations or the hypotheses that we formulated today are still the best ones, I would be gobsmacked. I would be really, really surprised. I'm not quite sure where I was going with that. I guess I'm just saying that to make all of these sober, serious pronouncements that a lot of cosmologists, etc., do, and physicists, I'm going to say it to both of them, we have no remote way of testing, or, well, it's sort of stupid. It's okay to say, I don't know. I frankly don't care. It's not even an interesting question to me. But none of it, by hypothesizing a first cause, and I know Christians get annoyed by this question and theists get annoyed by this question. Well, if you can hypothesize a intelligent designer who's always existed, I can hypothesize that the entire universe has always existed in one form or the other. So it's sort of hypocritical of me to provide an out for your own hobby horse, for your own belief system, that you then deny your opponent. That's really what I have to say on that.
Yeah. Well, I will say that historical scientists, they do make assumption that the laws of nature, as we understand them, are constant, and that's kind of how they derive how they test their hypothesis, where they derive their theories from, and that is an assumption, and up to thus far, it's held true, and of course I withhold the possibility that things aren't constant. Let's take radiocarbon dating, for example, that maybe at one time, I might be messing up the science here, but these carbon atoms lost whatever molecule, I think protons, at a greater rate than they do now, and the measurements are null. But and I actually think you're spot on. I read a book about how that compared how we discern the natural world 200 years ago to today, and almost everything's wrong. And then if you hop back 200 years before that, how almost everything's wrong. And it's right to assume in the future that almost everything that we believe 200 years in the future will be wrong. Now, I don't see that as a problem per se, because I still believe, I guess, that knowledge is a journey, that truth is a journey, and honestly, that objective reality, absolute objective reality, might be unknowable for us given the limits of our chemical constructs. But it's still our best way forward. It has less problems than other presuppositions. So, I mean, and that's kind of where I'm at now. And I guess in terms of first cause, I actually ascribe to infinite loop theory. I don't think true nothingness could exist. I think that, as we understand it, matter can neither be created or destroyed. Well, that leads me to believe that it always has existed. And, and as we talked, and as you rightly pointed out, if they can posit that there is something infinite, well, I think it's right to assume that everything, that matter could be infinite, matter and energy could be infinite, and that it's just in a massive cycle. So the Big Bang happens, matter expands, gravity causes it to contract back into an infinitesimally small point, and there we are again. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, or something that we haven't anticipated yet. I understand that science hypothesizes that everything that happens on Earth, that all of the laws that we theorize here apply 6 trillion light years away in every place throughout the universe. I'm going to have to say I'm not very happy with that assumption for the reason that if the dimensions of the universe are as vast as we hypothesize, and if we've been around, or the universe has existed for as long as we think that it has in this incarnation, man, that would be like sticking your head out your window and never having left your own neighborhood and trying to guess what the weather was like in Shanghai.
Right. It's like, reminds me a little bit of, like, I don't know, Plato's Cave or something.
Yeah. We basically have no idea. I understand that we have to proceed currently as if that's true. That's why, and I'm a methodological naturalist, but in the original meaning of the word. Now methodological naturalism is conflated with metaphysical naturalism. They're not the same thing. So yes, a priori, most practicing scientists, although far from all, object that there is no supernatural, so it shouldn't even be taken into consideration. But it was Christian natural philosophers who, what do you want to say, formulated the methodological naturalism, and that's not how it was originally formulated. It existed in other forms way back to the Greeks. But in its original formulation, you didn't discard the possibility of the supernatural, but you looked for that last. And you did that for a very rational rational, sensible reason.
I hate to interrupt you. We only got 10 seconds left, and I did want to thank you for this discussion. As I said, I've watched your debates. I'm a fan, and maybe we can find something we can actually argue about. But I thought this was
actually argue about. Okay, well, thank you very much.